This is going to be the first of probably many information interviews I'll be doing with various officials in town to talk about issues that matter to residents at the moment. And there's a lot going on in our police department. So we thought we would kick it off with our fantastic police chief, Battiloro. So I thought what I would do is just bring up a few topics, and then we did get a few questions in advance from the public, and then we can address those, and then people now through Zoom can submit any other questions through the chat. So with that, why don't we start off with some things that were fairly recent, and that has to go with the ongoing issues that we and surrounding communities have had regarding car thefts and things like that. And can you just give us an update on where that is, why it's happening, and what the department is doing about it?
Sure. Well, to date in 2020, we've had 24 car thefts, which is a bit of an increase from what we've seen last year. Last year, in the total year 2019, we had 22 car thefts. So, we're just entering the fourth quarter now, and we've surpassed last year's total. So that is, it's disappointing, but it's not exactly unexpected. This is a widespread problem in suburban New Jersey communities. Westfield is not exempt from the problem. Towns very similar to Westfield, Summit, Chatham, are experiencing similar problems. It's very difficult for the police to combat this without the public's participation. We've talked time and time again about what community policing is, Mayor, and it's really a partnership between the police and the community. We're putting all of our patrol efforts, our investigative efforts into combating this problem, but we're unfortunately not seeing the residents do their part. That's unfortunate. And until our residents step up and start doing their part, we're probably never going to completely eliminate this problem here in Westfield. And by doing their part, what I mean is, of the 24 stolen cars this year, at least 22 of them had the key or the key fob in it at the time of the theft, and the car was left unlocked. And as long as we continue to make ourselves easy targets like this, criminals are going to continue to come to Westfield and look to steal cars. We've probably had 2 or 3 times as many attempted car thefts this year than we've had actual car thefts. Again, all of these cars are left unlocked at the time of the burglary. So that's disappointing. I know that residents don't want to hear this, but they do have a role, they play a part, and they bear a responsibility. This is a community problem, and it's not going to be solved by the police and police alone. We continue to make arrests for car thefts, but unfortunately, we have not eliminated the problem here in Westfield. And until the residents start doing their part, we're probably never going to completely eliminate this problem. But I can tell you our investigative resources are working hard here to develop suspects and to make arrests. And unfortunately, arrests alone are not going to solve the problem, but we're certainly putting our efforts into this problem. We've changed our patrol practices at night. Most of these thefts are occurring during the overnight hours, usually between about 2 and 6 o'clock in the morning. And as we go into winter time now, when people start warming up their cars come 7, 8 o'clock in the morning when they're getting ready for work, I expect that, we'll see even more. Getting into the fourth quarter here, we have not suppressed this problem completely, and we won't until residents start stepping up, recognizing they have a role, they play a part, and they bear a responsibility in this problem.
Chief, can you talk about, I know we just saw, I think, a Facebook video from the Summit Police Department, and they saying the exact same thing. I think they mentioned, if I get it right, that they had 25 car thefts, I think, so far this year, thereabouts.
I didn't watch that video, but yeah. I'm aware that towns like Summit, Chatham, we're actually working with some of these towns, sharing information, sharing intelligence. So I know that other towns comparable to Westfield are seeing the same problems with the same numbers. As a matter of fact, if you look at some other municipalities, we're probably in very good shape compared to their numbers. But no doubt it's a problem here in Westfield, perhaps not as big as it is elsewhere, but I can tell you other towns are seeing it, and even towns immediately adjacent to us. And I'm hoping that this is a good sign when you see an increase in car thefts in towns like Mountainside and Scotch Plains, that we're successfully locking our cars and forcing the criminals to look elsewhere. I've had this conversation with you before. we, the police, cannot eliminate crime. We can't. The problems are much greater than that which we can solve. You know, when you talk about the the distribution of wealth in today's society and the drug problems and all these things, police are not going to solve them. We're not going to totally and completely eliminate crime. I really believe the best we can do is try and displace it, meaning force it elsewhere, by hardening our targets here. And when I see other towns starting to experience the same problems that we've been experiencing, I'm hoping that that's telling me that our residents are getting the message, they're locking their cars, they're removing their keys, they're hiding their valuables, and that people are going elsewhere because it's not so easy in Westfield anymore. So I don't want to sound happy that other towns are experiencing it, but I think it's a good sign. I think it's a good sign that we're successfully displacing the car theft problem and making it somebody else's problem. So hopefully the messages that we've been delivering, you know, the 9 p.m. routine that we did for almost 2 years, the message boards that are out there telling people to lock your cars, hide your valuables, take your keys, I hope that message is getting across. And I think it is, because we are seeing other towns to start experiencing an increase in this. So I think we're successfully displacing the problem.
Can you give a little context behind, like, the criminals, if you will? Like, where is this emanating from, and how are these car thefts being used, and what's happening, and then why, you know, what are they doing with the cars that actually enables us to recover so many of them? I'm trying to understand the motivation, and is it part of a much larger crime ring?
It certainly is part of a much larger crime problem. You know, 22 of the 24 cars that have been recovered were recovered on the streets of Newark after they've been used in the commission of crimes like robberies and carjackings. Most of the cars are recovered within 24 to 48 hours thereafter. So, you know, these cars, they're being stolen for a reason. They're being used in the commission of crimes, and then they're being dumped on the streets of Newark, which is in many instances where we're recovering them. And when we recover them, they're processed for evidence. We look for latent fingerprints. We take DNA swabs off steering wheels and other objects in the vehicle that might have been touched. And we try and, you know, really dump our investigative resources into developing suspects and identifying persons for arrest that way. But these cars are being used in the commission of crimes elsewhere, particularly in Essex County communities. And I know Newark several months ago was appealing to New Jersey suburban communities to start locking your cars in, because these cars are being recovered in Newark. That's where it seems to be the hotbed of criminal activity.
Now, what recommendations would you have for residents who might see, you know, activity in the street, or they see the Ring doorbell is capturing somebody? How should a resident respond to that?
Well, I will tell you, the residents have been fantastic with forwarding us their Ring video. We've been able to identify suspects and subsequently make arrests as a result of it. What we're seeing, it's not a sophisticated operation. It's basically our criminals are walking up to high-end vehicles that they observe parked in driveways. They're pulling on door handles. They're getting in the car. They're ransacking it, and they're looking to see if the key's in it by stepping on the brake and trying to start it. When the car starts, well, then it's gone. But I will tell you, it's not a sophisticated operation. It's a matter of numbers or percentages. The more cars you try, the more likely you are to find a key or a key fob in the car, and thus you're able to steal it with ease. So that's really been, you know, the method of operation here. The residents have been fantastic in forwarding us that video. So we've seen enough of what's going on that we know precisely this is not a sophisticated operation. I will say a lot of people, we rely on our residents to be our eyes and ears out there. There's over 100 miles of roadway in the town of Westfield. And between the hours of 2 and 5, you know, obviously we deploy our manpower based on a proportionate need. There's less of a proportionate need for so many officers during those hours of the day. So we're generally not running as many officers. So we rely on residents to call us when they see or they hear suspicious you know, activities or persons in their neighborhood. We have seen a problem where people, you know, have made direct observations and they have not called us, where they have not called us in a timely manner. And that makes it very difficult for us we're responding after the fact. And then it's, you know, there's really not much we can do until we recover your car in Newark or wherever it's going to be recovered. But, you know, these people our criminals are scouring neighborhoods. They're there for a period of time. And if we can be focused with our patrol efforts, you know, the likelihood of making apprehensions is that much more greater.
And yeah, I think some people say, you know, oh, I didn't want to bother the police, or it was small, or my car just, but
That is precisely what we're here for. We're here to be bothered. We want you calling us because, you know, like I said, it's so difficult. We've been focusing patrols on neighborhoods that have been affected, and then we're hit 2 or 3 blocks over where we weren't focusing our resources. So we need people to point us in the right direction. We need to be able to hear from our residents and know where we need to focus our resources when the actual incidents are occurring.
And that's what I think people need to understand. You're never bothering, you're helping establish crime patterns, which enables you to do your job.
Yes. And I know a lot of people have probably had their vehicles burglarized and have not reported it to us, whether they didn't want to come across as appearing stupid because they left their car unlocked, or what, you know, the stigma or the embarrassment of being a victim. But we certainly can develop information and evidence from every single report that we take. It gives us time frames, it gives us locations and neighborhoods where we need to focus. So even if, you know, you think it may go nowhere, we would appreciate it certainly if you could report it to us.
That's great. And I just want to remind everybody that, you know, you can input questions in the chat if you have any specific questions for the chief. But I'm going to switch gears a minute to talk about juveniles. And you recently established a juvenile bureau. Can you talk a little bit about that and how you established it and what its intention is?
Sure. This was one of my goals when I made chief 2 years ago. And I'm thankful that as of August 1st, we now have a newly implemented Juvenile Community Policing Bureau here in the Westfield Police Department. It's headed by Detective Sergeant Lauren Maloney, who's a 15-year veteran of the police department. And I couldn't think of a better supervisor to lead this unit than her. It consists of a dedicated full-time juvenile detective, Elizabeth Savnik, who again, probably no better person in the work, you know, with the youth of our community than her. And it also includes our 3 full-time SROs. You know, obviously our SROs are in the schools Monday through Friday when school is in session. You know, when school is not in session during the summertime, we've refocused the efforts of those SROs and made them community service officers. And particularly during the pandemic, we made them available to tend to the needs of our community, whatever they might be. But the Juvenile Bureau was intended to focus on juveniles, where, you know, we investigate incidents, whether they're crimes or criminal offenses that involve juveniles, whether they're victims, whether they're actors, whether they're witnesses. I want to make sure that, you know, our juveniles their best interests are being looked after, that we're taking their best interests into consideration when we're determining how to proceed with criminal investigations. And I wanted to expand that role too, not just to include juveniles, but to include our senior citizens and other persons in the community with special needs. And really, these officers in this bureau have been our ambassadors. And I've charged them with going out and developing relationships with various segments in the community. And they've begun their Coffee with the Cops tour. We started on September 29th at the Senior Citizens Complex. Sergeant Maloney decided she wanted to start the tour with the senior citizens down at 1129 and 1133 Boynton Avenue. And we had coffee with them, casual cup of coffee. They each received their own free Westfield police mug. The attendance was fantastic. We had 30+ participants at each building, but it was a matter of getting out, introducing ourselves, letting the senior citizens know that we are there for them. All they have to do is pick up the phone and call us. We are there for them. A lot of our seniors tend to fall victim to various scams. So we were disseminating a lot of educational information, but really looking to get out and to build a relationship with the community. And that's part of the function of our Juvenile and Community Policing Bureau here. We will take our next stop of Coffee with the Cop to Rockin' Joe's on October 21st. After we meet with our senior citizens again in Mindawaskan Park, we will be disseminating free reflective vests and doing a walking safety presentation with them, and then you and I will take a lap or two around the park with them. But these are all events that are aimed at getting out into the community, building relationships, letting people know we're here for them, and letting them know that policing is a partnership. It's a partnership, and that our residents, whether they're juveniles or senior citizens or those with special needs, they're all part of that partnership.
Yep. And so, yeah, a plug for Lifelong Westfield too, which is our organization that we started to support our seniors, and they've had a great partnership with you and the department. And so the safety vest thing was very popular last year, and we anticipate it being popular again. And
Our initial
Midwescan will be
order,
all decked out for Adams Fest too, the little fairyland, the forest.
our initial order of vests were all disseminated. We're all stocked up for the next event, but they've been overwhelmingly popular. So, obviously we've found something that there's a need for in the community, and that's great to see.
It's been great. All right, so let's focus on teens a little bit. There was a lot of, recent news about the teens in Mindawaskan Park, and now we're hearing about things that are happening downtown. Can you talk a little bit about what you think is happening, how we manage it, and, how we create this, you want teens to feel comfortable with the police, but also, you need to make sure that they're, not intruding with the quality of life of others. So can you talk about that?
Well, I'll tell you first that the gathering of youths or juveniles here in town is not a new problem. It's existed since, God knows, I remember as a patrol officer 25 years ago dealing with them in downtown Westfield, whether it was behind Starbucks or on a street corner here in Westfield. They initially, like the downtown area, and why not? It's a great place to hang out. We've seen recent problems here in Mindawaskan Park. It's resulted in some damage to the playground equipment, some damage to the landscaping. It's important for everybody to know that this time of year, our parks close at dark. So, nobody should be in Mindawaskan Park or any municipal park for that matter, after dark this time of year. We've seen large numbers congregating in Mindawaskan Park. And when I say large numbers, some of those numbers have been projected to be in excess of 100 juveniles in Mindawaskan Park. I think they like it in part because it's dark. It's an outdoor place to hang out. And, I think what we're seeing with the resurgence in these gatherings of juveniles is a culmination of a lot of things. I think a lot of people have been pent up inside. They need to get out. They need fresh air. They need the socialization. And, we're starting to see those gatherings again. I think they particularly like Mindawaskan Park because it was dark, and they could almost, hang out there in the cloak of darkness. So to combat that problem, to try and displace them and send them somewhere else, we've erected 2 30-foot light towers there to illuminate the playground at night, and kind of take away their cloak of darkness there. But obviously, the gathering of juveniles is another community problem, like car theft. And the police alone are not going to solve the problems associated with these gatherings of juveniles. We've only displaced them, much like the crime problem that we're trying to do. We've displaced them and we've forced them to go somewhere else. So now we're seeing, the large gatherings downtown again. We're hearing complaints about juveniles accessing rooftops and hanging out on the rooftops of buildings in the downtown area. It's important for everyone to know we do have a foot patrol in the downtown area every single night until at least 11 o'clock at night. There is an officer assigned to foot patrol, and he has been basically, I've likened it to you, it's like hoarding cattle. We don't want public passageways obstructed. We don't want to have people walk in the street because there's large groups on the sidewalk. We don't want to see some of the landscaping and the plantings of stores damaged. We don't want to see our precious butterflies damaged. We've had 3 of them damaged already. I don't think necessarily that there was criminal intent with a lot of these incidents, the damage. I just think it's the sheer volume of people out there, perhaps not being as careful or considerate as they should be. But I will tell you, bicycles on the sidewalks, things like that are constant complaints that we're hearing. And I'm very saddened, just this weekend, we stopped a juvenile on a bicycle to address some of these very issues. And to say that his demeanor was less than acceptable towards the police resulted in him being taken into protective custody, him being issued summonses for the violations, and having his parents come down and pick him up. So those are really not the types of incidents that we want to see, the interactions that we want to have. But, our officers are not going to be disrespected. They have a job to do. They're going to go out there and they're going to do that job. And when they meet resistance, they're going to take appropriate action, which includes, taking juveniles into custody, calling their parents, and at the the most extreme, signing juvenile delinquency complaints against them for criminal mischief or trespassing, whatever the case may be. But certainly, if necessary, we will sign juvenile delinquency complaints and force them into the criminal justice system.
Yeah, and I think, I think you're right, though. The large majority are kids just trying to be teens and looking for things to do. And it is disconcerting to our businesses at the moment, especially our restaurants who have expanded their outdoor seating and sidewalking with kids, riding their bikes. And I had one say, their wait staff almost got ran over by kids on bikes. It's just like a culmination of bad, potential bad things to happen. So obviously the foot patrol is really important. And someone just asked the question about creating safe spaces for juveniles, which I got a lot of. I know a lot of those comments after the Mindawaskan. And we've given that a lot of thought. It's kind of funny. I have a 15-year-old son, and I don't want to say he speaks for all teens, but he definitely understands the psyche. And it's a tricky kind of thing trying to find things for teens because in many cases, the things that are most appealing to them are things that are not really sanctioned by adults. And so oftentimes when we try to create things for teens, just because it's been sanctioned by adults makes it a place that they don't want to go. That being said, someone did send me, one parent resident send me a note, and I think it was a link to what they're doing in many other cities. In Boulder, Colorado comes to mind about public spaces for teens and the kind of things that they like, that you feel like, they feel like they're somewhat independent, but they're at least in a place that could be managed. And one of the things that we're doing as part of our redevelopment efforts, I've spoken to several people. I think we want to definitely consider public spaces and opportunities for teens and a combination of a community center that would have programming for teens along with some of these park-like features that make Mindawaskan so appealing to them, but yet would be more age appropriate for them. So I think, and there used to be a teen center back in the day, Chief, right? In the police department.
There was in the municipal building in the basement here. But I will tell you, the numbers of juveniles that we're seeing out there are our teen room, as it was called, in the basement of the municipal building could not accommodate the numbers that we're seeing. Just to touch upon something you said, obviously the solution to this problem is not going to be police and police enforcement action. It's going to be something that requires community input, whether it's a community center, a safe space, or dedicated space for juveniles. But this is precisely what community policing is about. It's about getting input from the community and finding solutions together as a community. So again, us moving juveniles from one corner to another, or moving them from Mindawaskan to downtown Westfield does not solve the problem. It does not solve the problem. It only displaces the problem. So whatever the solution is here, it's going to require community input, and together as a community, we're going to be able to find a solution. But the signing of juvenile, this is not the type of action that we want to take. It's the type of action that we'll be forced to take when we meet belligerent, disrespectful juveniles down there who do not want to follow the rules. There are ordinances, there are laws, everything that pertains to riding bikes on sidewalk. We're seeing people just with a disregard for those ordinances and for those laws. And at some point, we need to take enforcement action to discourage the activity. But ultimately, finding a solution is going to be a community solution here.
That's right. And listen, I think if there were parents that would be willing to, take it on about things, the art of the possible, it would definitely come with the support of the municipality and the police department. And I do understand, word has it, that a lot of these kids that we're finding out are coming from other towns as well. So it's, according to my son, word was out that Mindawaskan was the place to congregate.
My understanding from my daughter, who has hung out there on occasion, she's 16. It's not Mindawaskan, it's Mindo.
Yeah, it's Mindo, absolutely.
I live in Cranford, and she attends Cranford High School, and apparently several students have come up to her at Cranford High School and told her to tell her dad to turn the lights off in Mindo.
Yes. So there you go. And I think you said the kid you got on the bike was from Springfield, and their kids coming from Bridgewater. So it's, we just want to make it a less appealing place for out-of-towners, and then we can deal with how we can manage our kids. But I agree with you. I mean, they're two separate issues. There's one that these kids definitely need a place to go, and they're in desperate need of socialization. but disrespecting the police and vandalism is unacceptable,
Yeah,
and isolation is no excuse for that. And I think we as parents also have to do our jobs to make sure we know where our kids are and make them feel the consequences of anything that's not
well,
appropriate.
I agree with you 100% there. So, like I said, our practice of curbside warnings has now advanced to, we take juveniles into short-term protective custody, we notify their parents, and then custody of that juvenile is turned over to their parent after making them aware of their child's behavior. If we don't see resolution with short-term protective custody, then obviously the next step to us is signing complaints, signing juvenile delinquency complaints. And I really hope it doesn't come to that. But, at some point, we've got to do something to discourage that type of behavior.
And just to be clear too, short-term protective custody means there's nothing going on any record or anything
Correct.
like that. It's
Correct. We're taking juveniles into custody for their health, their safety, their well-being, and turning them over to the custody of a parent. Our juvenile bureau has been directed, our juvenile detective and supervisor will review every custodial incident to determine what is appropriate follow-up action. But in most instances, they're not being taken into custody because of serious crimes or criminal offenses. It's just because of behavior-related issues. So, but they will review every single instance, and depending upon the reception received when they reach out to parents, that determines what action follows from there. So, but every single custodial incident involving a juvenile resulting from these gatherings downtown will be reviewed by our juvenile detectives, and they will reach out to the parents of these juveniles and determine what the appropriate course of action is going forward. So we're hoping that this next step in the process here is enough to discourage and to eliminate this type of disorderly behavior downtown, but we are prepared to take it to the next step if we have to, which would be signing juvenile delinquency complaints.
All right, so speaking of kids and teens, let's shift a little bit to Halloween, because there's been a lot of questions about Halloween. And so I'll just, remind everybody about, what we plan on doing. And really there was some state and local guidance that came out regarding what people should, using their heads essentially to be smart about Halloween. So I'll just address some of the best practices that I think people should be implementing, and then I'll let the chief address what they're going to be looking out for that weekend from a security standpoint. Now, I'd be lying if I didn't tell you that having Halloween fall on a Saturday this year does make me very nervous. I'm worried that it lends itself to Halloween parties and gatherings. I feel like in spite of upticks in cases that's happening around the state, Westfield, I think we've gone 5 days now with no cases. I get really worried about anything that might jeopardize that. So I would just implore, kids and parents to just be very smart and cautious. And obviously I think trick or treat is something that these kids need to look forward to. I think the whole, everything that we do, I think it's mentally healthy for everybody to have this. But so what they're suggesting for those that aren't comfortable participating in trick or treating, for the seniors, our Lifelong Westfield group is actually creating signs for seniors to put out front to let people know that they're not participating in trick or treating. I would suggest any other families that aren't participating to turn off your porch light and put a sign in the door. And I think, this is one that everybody's going to understand if you're not comfortable. For those trick or treaters, wear a mask. Your regular Superman mask doesn't count as a mask. Please use one of the masks that kids will wear to school, typically for anybody over the age of 2, and that goes for parents as well. Ideally, just stay within your family group as a trick-or-treating group. Keep your trick-or-treating plan small and contained, ideally to just within your blocks or neighborhoods, and social distance, and really try to refrain from what we think are the inevitable asks for a Halloween party or get together afterwards, and let's just try to be really smart about it. We have gotten many requests from different residents that have asked us to close their streets on Halloween. We've gotten lots and lots of requests, but it's just not feasible for and I'll let the chief address it, it's just not feasible for us to close so many streets in town over the course of the night. We couldn't manage it. We couldn't get the barricades out there. So we're just going to ask people to self-regulate and just be very smart. Ideally, we would like traffic. If people can stay home that day and stay off the streets so that people can spread out a little bit safely without having to worry about dodging traffic. So, and we'll send out more specific guidelines in writing, just as some of these reminders to be smart. But I know we've gotten questions also about ideal time to be out. And I'm going to hand it over to Chief Battiloro to address kind of his recommendations from a safety and security standpoint.
Well, certainly from a safety point of view, we would like everybody to be home by the time it gets dark out there in the interest of safety. A number of years ago, we had a young girl struck by a car on Dudley Avenue by Clark Street, trick-or-treating after dark, not walking, on the sidewalks. So I have obvious safety concerns and would certainly, with it being on a Saturday this year, our kids can actually get out earlier in the day, and there's no reason for them to be out there after dark. I will tell you what concerns me more about having, Halloween on a Saturday is having a mischief night on a Friday night. And with the gatherings of juveniles that we've seen out, on the weekends and having a mischief night fall on a Friday night, obviously that concerns me. And I can't stress enough to parents, have some accountability with your children. Make sure they're respecting other people and their property. I can tell you from a police perspective, we will be out in force on Friday night. We will be out in force on Saturday. Our entire juvenile bureau and our school resource officers and our special police officers will be out on mischief night. And it has traditionally been a night of mischief in Westfield. What many people think is harmless mischief actually results in property damage. So, just be respectful of other people's property and other people in general. But we will be out in force. And as a matter of fact, I have a full day of training Friday, but depending upon how that goes, I may be suiting up and out on the streets Friday night as well.
Thanks. And I realized I addressed trick-or-treaters, but I didn't address those that are actually handing out candy. So if you're participating and you're someone that's going to be handing out candy, ideally do it from outside to avoid them knocking on doors and having to open up doors. Everybody should be wearing a mask. The ideal solution, the notion, we don't want kids all putting their hands in the same candy bowl. I'm naive to think that putting the candy bowl on the front porch and that's going to last you more than 10 minutes is probably not realistic. But another solution is individually wrap smaller treats is obviously ideal. And if you could actually put them out like on a table or something that they can just pick them up without anybody having to do any personal interaction would be ideal. So again, just be smart and be thoughtful and be safe. And I know we said nobody after dark, but isn't typically dusk a very dangerous time to?
It is, and I don't know what the weather forecast is going to be, but it gets darker earlier. You worry about things like fog, or when it's moist out or damp out, or there's rain. That just increases, the visibility issues. So it's certainly in the interest of safety. It's great to have everybody off the street before it's dark.
Great. And so let's address, there were a couple of questions that we got in advance, and I know Kim Ford is on the line. So Kim, can you read some of the ones that came in previously?
Sure. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So we have a question from Sue Feldman, and Sue says, "It is great to see Westfield police walking the beat downtown. What concerns me is that I see policemen not wearing facial coverings while downtown. My question is, when the guidance is to wear a mask downtown, why are they not?"
Okay. I've heard a couple complaints about our officers not wearing masks downtown. I have issued a directive, and it's a special order that's in place. As a matter of fact, I've issued an entire volume of special orders just as a result of the pandemic alone. And one of them is that our officers shall follow Executive Order number 163 issued by the governor of the state of New Jersey, which requires them to wear face coverings or masks when they are outside and cannot socially distance. For the most part, the direct observations that I've seen of our officers is that they've been pretty good following that. I'm sorry to hear there's been some instances where officers were observed not wearing masks. I will reiterate that directive to them. I'll tell you this, I've been on accident scenes, I've been on other calls for service. My direct observations of our officers are they are pretty darn good about wearing their masks, especially since I've issued them all top quality Westfield police masks. It took us a couple of shots to find the right one that they liked and fit them well. But I'm sorry to hear that. I will make sure our supervisors are in fact, properly supervising their subordinates. But I will tell you, my direct observations is that our officers have been pretty good, complying with the directive of the governor, and in particular my special order that requires them to comply with the directive of the governor.
Great, thanks. Is there any others, Kim?
Yes, we have a question submitted by Tom O'Neill. He says, with New Jersey's complex laws and ordinances regarding firearms, would Westfield consider seminars or classes so that law-abiding citizens can be aware of the legal uses with firearm ownership and use?
Well, Tom, that's a great question. I will tell you this. Since this pandemic began, we have seen record numbers of applications for firearms ID cards and permits to purchase handguns. By record numbers, I mean in excess of 400. And I now have an officer, a detective, assigned to a newly created unit within the police department here, our firearms unit, which handles not only our firearms training, but all applicant processing matters. And he told me about 2 weeks ago that he was just starting the receipt of July's applications for firearms IDs and permits to purchase, to give you an idea of his workload this year alone. That's a great question. I will tell you, we have not considered a seminar. Maybe that's something that the detective can work on, but I will tell you this. Detective William Kleeman is the officer who was assigned to our firearms applicant processing unit, and he's perhaps the most knowledgeable person that I've seen in a long time on firearms related matters, and he has a great relationship with the New Jersey State Police, and you are free to call him. His direct number is 908-789-6054, 6054. You can call him. If he's not at his desk, leave him a message, or you can email him. His email address is wkleeman, Kleeman, at wpdnj.org. wkleeman@wpdnj.org. And you can certainly ask any questions of him you want. If he does not have the answer, he'll find it for you. He'll consult with the New Jersey State Police, their firearms unit, and he will get you an answer. So feel free to reach out to him. If there is significant interest, we can certainly put something together, but feel free to reach out to Detective Kleeman, ask him any questions you want. Yes, you are correct. New Jersey has some of the most complex gun laws in the country. Everybody is subject to a comprehensive background investigation to determine their fitness to possess a firearm. That's Detective Kleeman's responsibility. It's his specialty. It's his area of expertise. So feel free to reach out to him with any questions or concerns or direction that you may need.
I actually think, though, that's an excellent suggestion from Mr. O'Neill. And I know we had spoken, and I don't know, Chris, might have been before your time, about a safety class, about gun safety and how they should be locked. And do we still hand out free gun locks?
We do. Not only do we disseminate literature with everyone when they come in here. Right now, we're mailing all firearms ID cards and permits to purchase, but we still do offer free firearms locks. All you have to do is step into the lobby of headquarters and ask for one. We have a steady supply of them. We will certainly, address any safety issues you have, issue you firearm locks if you need them. But yes, we could certainly consider putting something together in the future regarding firearm safety, proper storage. New Jersey has what's called CAP laws, child access prevention laws. There's tremendous liability if a firearm should fall in the hands of a child and something happens there, you can be held criminally liable. So I think educating the public is a great idea and something that we will certainly look into.
Yeah, that would be great. Anything else, Kim?
We had an email from Sarah Markle. I think we've covered it. She was thanking us for hosting this and also just with tips for Halloween, which I think we covered in terms of recommended timeframes and guidelines. So that's covered. And I don't see anything in the chat if we want to take a minute and see if anyone wants to put a question in.
And I'll apologize again for the tech snafu, And as always, and we are going to be showing this recording, as I mentioned earlier, on Facebook and TV 36. So I would just say, if anybody has any questions, please submit them. You can submit them to me directly at mayorbrindle@westfieldnj.gov or to the Chief Battiloro, and you are C. Battiloro at
WPDNJ.org. First initial, last name.
Your org, gov. That's what I forget sometimes. So, but we are always happy to answer any of your questions. And thank you all for tuning in. Again, apologies for the tech snafu, but I hope this was helpful. And I hope you'll tune in to the next one of these. I'll probably do in another week or two with another town official based upon something of interest and that's topical to residents. So thank you. And thank you, Chief, very much for participating today.
Thank you, Mayor. Pleasure.
All right. Bye-bye.